This was like my template. I also used the biochem page and then the biostats. Some videos are like 3 minutes. My first aid book, and you can see it's literally torn to shreds. Hi you guys, and welcome back to my channel. It is Shay Michelle, and I'm so happy you are joining me today. You're probably like, oh my gosh, she has scrubs on, she has her stethoscope on. Today was actually my off day from the hospital. We get 1 day off a week, but long story short, I just finished taking all my like Fabletics photos. If you guys love me, you'll go check them out. But this video is not sponsored in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, let's just dive into it. We're gonna be talking about step 1. Basically at my school, you have to pass step 1 before you can start the clinical phase. It's February 21st. I took my step 1 test on January 11th. And so usually it takes about 2 weeks to come back. And yeah, I got my, well, you don't get a score, you just get pass or fail. And so I got my pass and I was so relieved, but honestly, I feel like the entire study process was a struggle that it didn't necessarily have to be. And that's why I'm making this video. So many of my friends really wanted me to make this video just because it's like, obviously I did pass, but simultaneously I feel like I could have streamlined my process so much more. So that's why I'm going to share this with you. So yeah, let's dive in. The first half is going to be more of my objective, like how I studied, what resources I used. I will not be like holding back anything, and like what I found valuable, what I didn't find valuable. And then the second half is going to be more of my like subjective personal experience. Sorry if I'm talking fast, but I just know there's a lot to get through. And I honestly just want to make sure I can say everything. Okay, so here's my laptop and let's get started. First things first, to give you guys an overview, I ended up taking from 8 weeks of dedicated study time. And what that means is we had our last test like Halloween weekend, and then we didn't have any new content or any real class after that. And so between that was just about 8 weeks. So I had 8 weeks studying. Originally I was supposed to take my test December 19th, but I just didn't feel ready. So for video resources, what I did is I used Pathoma. Basically, I literally watched every single Pathoma video. Rather than during the school year, I used Boards and Beyond, but I didn't want to use it for step studying just because Boards and Beyond videos tend to be a tad bit longer, rather than Pathoma is like much more to the point. So that's why I watched Pathoma instead. And I felt like it's all the same content. So in my opinion, it didn't really make much of a difference. And then I also used Sketchy, and I used it for Farm and Micro. Now, for Micro Sketchy, I had also used it prior, like during the normal micro test that I had in my first year of medical school. So it really didn't require much for me to just like 3 times speed rewatch those videos. However, I never honestly learned pharmacology, which was one of the main issues. So I felt like I hit a huge roadblock when I was taking my practice test, in the fact that I felt like the pharmacology section, I just could not memorize all of these drugs and stuff like that. And so I asked one of my advisors, I was like, be honest, how do I memorize these? And she just said, Sketchy. You got to do Sketchy, just because it's kind of like with the names and meanings and everything, not everything is so beautifully aligned. So I kid you not, midway through my studying, I powered through those every single day and like just tried my hardest. And then I just reiterated the knowledge by doing the Anki cards. I would advise you, if for pharmacology, to start early with Sketchy. And when I say start early, I honestly say do Pharm Sketchy with every actual subject exam you have. So then at least you're learning it in correspondence to like the subject and like the system. And then your second time around doing step study is more of just like, oh, remembering like, oh yeah. Like, next thing I did is video wise was I used Pixorize. I only used the stuff that was on YouTube, the free stuff on YouTube, but I didn't use it a lot. I used it for probably like 5 or 6 concepts that I just felt like weren't sticking. So I really recommend Pixorize because they're more specific than like Boards and Beyond and stuff like that. Those are more whole concepts, rather than Pixorize is much more like, oh, let's talk about hyperbilirubinemia specifically, or like let's talk about Little syndrome. Like it's very specific to like specific illnesses. And so the videos are so short. Some videos are like 3 minutes, others are, the longest video I saw was like 10, and it went over multiple concepts. So I would definitely encourage you guys to look into those towards kind of like the end of your studying, if you're just like, why can't I memorize this? then tag on a Pixorize video. And I felt like that really helped me for like the random things that I just couldn't seem to memorize. And so also when it comes to these videos, other than like I just told you, Sketchy, Farm, and Pixorize, I try to get these videos done as soon as possible, as fast as possible. So I got all of my Pathoma videos done in the first 2 weeks of my studying. And I would encourage you, if you look at any resources, they're always like, do it as fast as possible, because technically watching videos is more passive learning, and you want to knock that out so then you can get more active learning and active practice. And so that's why I would definitely encourage you guys to just like do that as early as possible. Next thing I did was obviously first aid. The one thing I do have is my first aid book, and you can see it's literally torn to shreds because this was my lifeline for all of step 1 studying. I went through first aid as I watched my Pathoma videos, and I would like make notes here because you guys know I'm a notes queen. I like to make my personal notes, but there's just so much for step that it's a lot easier to just kind of like, I just flip to a random page, but just kind of, what's that word, annotate your actual book. And so on top of that, towards the latter half of my studying, so in that last month of studying, I ended up rereading this first aid book front to back 2 times. I can say now, being on the other side, I do think reading this book word for word helped me, just because there's so much information that can get lost. Because I felt like when I was doing my practice questions, my Uworld questions, I would get stuff wrong and then find it was literally in this first aid book. Everything I'm telling you guys, I encourage you guys to do much earlier than I did, but I would say make a schedule where you can read this first aid book. So my schedule is I would read it front to back in 7 days, then I would take 7 days off, then I would read it again front to back in 7 days, and then 7 days off. 7 days a week. I would read it for a week, not read for a week, read for a week, not read for a week. And honestly, that was my 2 times. If I did attempt to read it a 3rd time towards the end, but it was just getting overwhelming, so that didn't happen. But I would definitely encourage you guys to read the first aid book front to back earlier on in your studying, just because it will help. The more you see it, the easier it is to identify it in a question stem. And then other than that, I did Uworld. In the beginning, I didn't do that much Uworld, but I could say in that last month of studying, I was pushing at least 100 questions a day. In the beginning, I think my goal was like 50, 60, and then closer to the test date, it kept increasing and increasing, because I determined I wanted to get at least 90% of the Uworld done before my test. Like, I just didn't think I would feel comfortable. So I was able to get 90% of Uworld done a week before my test, and then I just used that last week to do all of my like redos for Uworld. Not all of them obviously, but like do a few here and there, review practice tests, very specific studying. But I just wanted to make sure I saw the content. I feel like with these questions, it's a different way of thinking. Just like reading first aid is amazing, but it's also different having someone describe it in a question stem than it is to read it, you know, for bullet points in your first aid book. So that's why I would definitely encourage you to do as much Uworld as you can. My biggest mistake is I did not start Uworld questions until like 2 weeks into my dedicated study time. And I 100% regret that. I think if I started Uworld early, I wouldn't necessarily have felt the scramble I did. And on top of that, I do want to say I did not study before dedicated. I know a lot of people that start really studying in the summer, and like they were able to take their test in November and then get like 2 months off of school. So I would say I encourage you guys to start as early as you possibly can, but don't overwhelm yourself. Next, Anki. I did Anki every day. Anytime I would miss Anki, I felt like I was forgetting things. So I encourage you guys to make Anki a serious habit. My goal was at least 500 cards a day, at least. I kind of go through them pretty fast. Most people say I go through them way too fast. So to each their own, but I would say at least an hour Anki a day. Gauge how important Anki is in your studying. First step, on King, the main deck is way too big. There's like tens of thousands of cards. So here are the real decks that I think you guys should Google. They're so much more condensed and so much easier to get through. For Pathoma, because I told you guys I watched Pathoma, if you guys look up Duke's deck, like Duke University, the school, Duke's deck, Duke has a Pathoma specific deck, and it has all the content, Personally, I feel like it's just as good as Anki, just so much more precise. I use Pepper Sketchy deck for farm and micro. I honestly still use it to this day. I'm in my internal medicine rotation and I still feel like the Anki deck is way too large for anything valuable. And so I do use the Pepper deck to this day. I just grabbed my iPad and I wanted to show you guys exactly what I did to study. I kind of made this little notebook. I use GoodNotes. I made a notebook that was titled Missed Questions, and with that, anytime I would miss a question, I would literally, when I would go over it, I would give it like a bullet point in here. So as you can see, I was missing tons of biochem questions, and this was like my template that I literally used for every single day of questions. So obviously this got pretty long and I couldn't review it every day, but I would make sure, like, once I did my questions at the end of the day, I would review all of these because this is all the content I got wrong. And then at the end of the week, I would try to have a huge review day, and then I would review like at least that whole week's worth of incorrect content. I didn't write a ton of stuff because that's not necessarily the point. The point is to pinpoint exactly what you got wrong and then go from there. And then outside of that, you guys know I am a notes queen. So of course I had to make notes. These notes are far too long. So these notes are 82 pages, but basically here's like an outline. I have every single system in here, and I made, I guess, let's be honest, instead of reading what, an 800-page textbook, I'd rather make 80 pages of notes. Honestly, don't think all of these notes are from scratch. You guys know I was a notes queen prior to step one. So for a lot of this, for example, like this endocrine section, like I already had this page finished because I used it when I was actually in the endocrine block. And so yeah, basically these are all the main concepts for the system, and that's that. And then I would try to add like anything when it comes to the pharmacology or the micro, but depending on how like intense the system was, and in addition how recent I did it. At the beginning though, I did put kind of like 2-3 pages of just information I felt like again wasn't sticking and I just kept getting wrong, and then I just made it a point in those final days to keep reading those first 3 pages every single day. What I did for biochem may be a little extreme, but I'm gonna be honest with you guys, I am not a traditional like biochem biology person. It's never been my forte to memorize the Krebs cycle. It's never been my thing. And so what I did in order to I wouldn't even say overcome it, but kind of overcome it, is I used the first 8 section. It's like the first few sections, the biochem, stuff like that, micro farm. I made it a point to reread that section every 3 days. Like I would give myself 3 days to read the first few sections, and then I just kept doing it. What I would do is, like I told you, I would read the book front to cover in a week. And how I would divvy that up is I would do 1 system a day. So say I'm doing cardio that day, and then I would spend another hour reading one of the biochem sections. And mind you though, I could get through the biochem like every 3 days. So in theory, it was like I was going through that first quarter of the first aid book 2 complete times while simultaneously going through all of the actual body systems 1 time. Kid you not, in the final week, aka like the final 3 days, I found Mehlman Medical, and this person has given so many huge study guides that are so high yield. Specifically for Mehlman Medical, I use the Arrows study guide, and so that study guide is amazing. It's like 3 pages, but you can get through it pretty quick. It's only like 10 words on a page. I also use the biochem page and then the biostats. I feel like they were very high yield on step 1, the content that was placed in these study guides. So I would recommend taking a look at them in like that last week. That's what I did. And basically all the things I go through now will be stuff I looked at in my final week of studying. I basically went on a complete Reddit rampage, and I was so scared to take the test, and I just was Googling everything that people thought helped. And so that's how I found all these resources that in a way I don't think you should necessarily look at before, or like before your last week, but it wouldn't hurt. I looked at it in my last week, and I feel like it was just enough time to just kind of like do some fast memorization of random concepts. I also watched the Randy Neal YouTube biostatistic videos. I do think they were helpful in allowing me to understand biostatistics, but I'm gonna be honest with you, I feel like the questions that were on STEP were so difficult when it came to biostats that I don't even know if the videos helped. Just because with or without the videos, I think I would have been confused. I watched Dirty Medicine for the ethics video, kind of to the same breath as what I said about Randy Neal, but simultaneously, Dirty Medicine just made me feel more confident when it came to ethics. But again, the ethics questions on step 1 were so difficult that, or not even difficult, it was just, they really get you in the answer choices because they're always so similar, and simultaneously, I feel like all of them you could do correct. And so it's just one of those where it's useful to watch these videos to feel a little bit more comfortable, but I don't think it'll like make or break you. I feel like on last week, I kind of did a resource overload with all of these extra resources, but I'm glad, and that's why I'm glad though that I didn't look at this extra stuff before the last week, before my test, because it would have been too much if I was balancing like 6 different study methods rather than before my test, all I was doing was Anki, Uworld, Sketchy, and Pathoma. Like those are kind of the classic things to do. Now I'm just gonna kind of transition to the more of the subjective content, are like my tips more so. I wanted to say celebrate the little victories. Step 1 can be such an isolating and draining process when you're studying. And so I think, I'm not gonna lie, I was struggling throughout it. I like had to leave my apartment and go back home just because I just didn't want the distractions nor allow myself kind of like unhealthy comparisons to how my friends said they were doing and stuff like that. And I'm not even gonna lie to you guys, before step 1, my average on Uworld was a 50%. Like it was not high at all. And I did talk to 30ers, and one of my closest 30-year friends also told me they were consistently getting questions wrong. And so that's what made me feel comfortable with it. But if I hadn't talked to that 30-year and only listened to some of my classmates, I would have felt so bad because all of them were talking about 70s and 80s and they felt bad for getting a 60. And I'm like, woo, if I get a 60%, that's a good day. Like another thing I wrote in here is like, be honest with yourself. If you don't feel ready, that's okay. Do not take the test. I would say like there's a chunk of people at my school that didn't feel ready going into the test and did pass. And then there's another chunk of us that delayed our test a time and felt a lot more confidence. And you know, that's what it just goes into, what type of person are you? And I know me, if I don't feel confident, I'm not going into that test. Like I'm not doing it, because then it's just gonna hurt everybody if it doesn't go the way, you know, we want it to. So that's why I ended up delaying my test for a total of a month and did it 3 different times, and everything worked out. So I would just say like, be honest with yourself of where you are and where you want to be before you take that test. And don't let anyone sway you. It's okay to take other people's opinions, but don't let just because someone said they're doing this mean you're doing it. Like it's okay not to. Tips I have for the actual test day: bring your own earplugs. They have earplugs, but I would just say bring your own, and bring like the ones that you can like throw away and stuff, because every time you go out the test you have to like change earplugs and stuff like that. And then it was kind of funny because when I was taking my test, someone was like typing their life away, and I was like, what standardized test could you be taking that requires all of this typing? And so thank God for earplugs. Basically I literally wore my earplugs, and then I put the big ones. They give you these huge ones, kind of like what you wear in like helicopters, and so I had to put both on in order to not hear the person typing. So please bring your earplugs. These are blue light glasses. I literally brought multiple pairs of blue light glasses. This test is a long test, so please make sure to bring snacks. So the way I took my test is I did the first 2 sections, no break. Then I took like a 5-minute break. Then I did the next 2 sections, no break. And I'm not gonna lie, by that second section, so technically out of all of them, my 4th section, I was feeling a little tired. I kind of regretted not taking a break just because I feel like the last like chunk of questions, I felt like I was just glossing over them. Like I wasn't reading them the way I should have been. Like I needed a break. So listen to yourself. Sometimes it's better to just take the break even if you don't think you need it. And then I took lunch. So I like ate a sandwich, used the bathroom. So I think my break was like 15 minutes probably. And then after that, I took a little mini break after every other section. I only had 3 more. And then after that, I would take like max 5 minutes. And by the time I finished, I think I still had something about this math is adding up, but I still had like 15 minutes, not 15, 30 minutes worth of break, at least 20 to 30 minutes worth of break left. You get an hour to break. So be conscious. Again, if you use too much of your break time, they will cut your test off. Like, so you need to be mindful and keep track of how much time you use. So that's why in the beginning, while I was still fresh, I just wanted to knock everything out. But yeah, I think that every single person watching this, you 100% have the capability to pass because you're watching this and you're preparing in advance. You're already doing better than I did. I did not watch a single YouTube video. I just let Reddit ruin my nerves completely. Congrats for getting this far. You got it. And let me know if you have any questions. But again, I hope you liked this video and I will see you guys in my next one.